Hi guys, today I have a quick video for you. Something that I ran into I found interesting to do with shame, the idea of shame and the concept of it, how that influences us and our reactions. Very oftentimes whenever we are being abused or belittled by someone who is trying to take advantage of us, we are put into demeaning, humiliating, difficult, downright threatening situations. And so we're doing things that, for example, if we saw someone in this situation, especially someone like a child or the elderly, someone who is disabled and having a hard time, that's like one of the more easier ways that we can see how we don't blame people for doing what they have to do. But that even translates to people who are fully capable and abled and adult, and yet they are in situations where it's not easy for them to get out of, or it's not possible for them to get out of, or just the idea of they should not even be in those situations in the first place were it not for people harming them or other people with devious plans for this person's life or for this person. Someone who's being objectified and completely used up and not treated like the full person that they are with any kind of respect. And before I play this audio here, my little disclaimer would be that I do not agree with Ashley Judd, especially recently, her political positions or anything that she might have said politically recently. However, she's telling her story on this video of her alleged encounters with Harvey Weinstein. Apparently, this man in Hollywood with power was tempting her, and he kept making very inappropriate gestures toward her and seductively, and asking her things like to pick out his suit for the day to wear, and basically being very suggestive toward her and expecting her to perform favors for him. And she said she kept saying no, 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 and he wouldn't listen. And she was trying to figure out like how the best way that she could get out. But what's interesting about her situation and other women who have complained of this is that they knew if they refused him, it could very possibly influence their career negatively. And so he keeps like not taking no for an answer and pressuring her, which is identical to stories other women have said. And so every other tactic that she tried wasn't working. And she tried some last-minute desperate thing just to kind of throw him off or put another idea in his head, a type of a attempt at bargaining to kind of change the subject and get him to stop the immediate demand. And not to mention, when there's a power differential like that, you don't know if you're about to be physically attacked or anything may happen. And so she decided to use a bargaining chip to either throw him off or stop the immediate barrage. And she basically told him maybe later, like in a trade-off, like maybe later I would sleep with you, whatever he was asking of her. And she said, if I win an Oscar in your movie. So here's what she says about it. And it's very interesting to hear what she has to say about being ashamed of saying something like that. It's like, should she be ashamed for making some sort of a proposition that would be, in its basic form, would be prostitution? Should she be ashamed of those words coming out of her mouth? And a lot of us, that's our problem. We're ashamed for things that we do and say when we are under a lot of duress that we would not put other people through. We wouldn't dream of putting someone else through that duress, or we would feel bad if we did, and we would look for situations to never do that to someone, and yet the abuser looks for situations to do that to people. And so one of the greatest unfairnesses that I see in abusive situations is for us to have to be left with some kind of a shame or a conscience issue for the things that we might have to do in a terrible, bad situation that was put upon us, either by the primary abuser or by a secondary abuser. And the primary abuser comes along and takes advantage of a bad situation or another abuser. And what's awful is having to live with or explain to other people who have questions about what happened or any of these type of situations, have to untangle the confusion of why did we ever do or say such a thing when we were under tremendous duress. And the narcissists, the psychopathic abusers, they would never think twice about acting like this. That's just how they act every day. But a person who is more innocent would sit there and have to come to terms with things that they didn't said, that they were not proud of, things they didn't said, and they may even have moments of, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why would I have done or said that? What led me to this? And in a way, of course, that's good because it's a sign of a healthy, good conscience, and we should never try to deaden that conscience. But there comes a time where it's just simply you are under a terrible situation that you would have never put anyone else through, something that you would not deliberately be putting people through flippantly and for a joke and for fun, for sport. And we have to come up with the most extreme of circumstances before we stop putting blame for a situation like that. And it's so much easier to let other people go free and yet to demand of ourselves, why did we not do better? But like I say, it's easier to imagine like a child who has just been captured. Let's say that we, heaven forbid, a small child was captured by a terrible, axe-murdering, violent person. And let's say that this child somehow or other, in its fighting and desperation, found a gun and pulled the trigger and shot the violent abuser, and he fell unconscious and the child ran away. Well, most of us would sit here and say, well, thank God, that was even a miracle, that child was able to go back home to its parents who would have never known what even happened to the child, and live out the rest of his little life. And we would hope and pray that child never had any bad feelings about what had to happen. And we would also be glad that the murderer was stopped because he kept murdering children. But it's just funny. It's like we have to come to those extreme situations before we recognize and before we can untangle how confusing it can get and let someone completely off the hook the way it should be, because no one should be putting people in these situations in the first place. By the time someone puts you in such a terrible situation, oh well, what comes out of your mouth toward them? Oh well. And so this was just some pretty interesting words I heard from Ashley Judd on her take on shame and what role it plays in our life, and how it makes us, how it can leave us feeling about situations that we never asked for and that we should have never been a part of. Were it not for the abuser, we would have never been a part of something like this.
Make a deal, an encounter someday.
And he kept coming back at me with all this other stuff. And finally, I just said, when I win an Oscar in one of your movies, okay? And he was like, yeah, when you get nominated. I said, no, when I win an Oscar. And then I just fled. Which I think, am I proud of that? I'm of two minds. The part that shames myself says no. The part of me that understands the way shame works says, that was absolutely brilliant. Good job, kid. You got out of there. Well done. It's a very important word, shame, and it's a very important thing to talk about. So we all do the best we can, and our best is good enough. And it's really okay to have responded however we responded.
She says afterward she had